So my name is Khalil. I'm the finance chair for the organizing committee for the Black in Design Conference. And I just want to say thank you to Trofit for such a wonderful dance session. So I'm honored now to welcome our next moderator, Jha D Williams. This panel is titled Imagining Black Futures, Designing for the Possible. Jha D Williams joins us from Mass Design, where she also curates and co-hosts her monthly open mic movement, If You Can Feel It, You Can Speak It. As a spoken word artist and event organizer, Jha D exclaims that there's a pure art in speaking your own truth, and is dedicated to creating spaces for artists, particularly those of the LGBTQIA communities of color. As a designer, she urges that design and the built environment are vehicles for equity, justice, and social change. Please welcome Jha D Williams.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Oh, y'all tired? You ain't got no breath left? We're gonna try this one more time, call and response community. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, that's better. We don't have to be strangers for long. Thank you for that lovely introduction. As it was said, my name is Jha D Williams, and I'm going to be the moderator for this panel here. I too am catching my breath, so if I take longer pauses, blame it on Trofit. Nobody told me that's what was happening. I ain't got the right shoes on, I ain't got the sports bra, I'm just feeling real inadequate right now, but that's okay. So I'm going to introduce our panelists briefly, and then we will all take the stage and have a conversation. Please feel free as I call you up. If you want to go sit, you can, so that we can definitely get this thing started. So let me go back this way. Our first panelist for this morning, now it still is Toni Griffin. Toni Griffin is a professor in practice of urban planning here at the GSD and leads the Just City Lab, which is a platform for developing value-based planning methodologies and tools. Toni is also the founder of Urban Planning for the American City, based in New York, specializing in leading complex, transdisciplinary planning and urban design projects for the multi-sector clients in cities with long histories of spatial and social injustice. So please welcome first Toni Griffin. A little bit more love, a little bit more love. Don't be shy. I know y'all are tired, I understand. Thank you. All right, our next panelist is going to be Kenneth Bailey, who is the co-founder of the Design Studio for Social Interventions, where he focuses on the research and development of design tools for marginalized communities to address complex social issues. With over 3 decades of experience in community practice, Bailey brings a unique perspective on the ethics of design as it relates to community engagement, the arts, and cultural action. Bailey was recently a visiting scholar in collaboration with the University of Tanzania and is currently pursuing his MFA at Bennington. So please welcome Kenneth Bailey to the stage as well. Y'all are getting better at this. You're getting better. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And our third panelist for this morning is Malcolm Davis, who was raised in Norfolk and Richmond, Virginia, by parents who's vastly expanded his understanding of the world through travel. Turn up for travel. This early exposure led to his interest in cultivating genuine relationships and discovering the inherent differences and similarities that define people in communities. An acute understanding of the need for complementing economic development initiatives to balance cultural destinations is a key factor in the way he encourages his project teams to develop respectful yet innovative solutions. So please welcome to the stage, Malcolm Davis. How y'all feeling? Can y'all breathe yet?
Funky.
Because I can.
There was a sweat working up in this room.
See, when they invited us to do this panel, y'all, they didn't say there was going to be a full body workout prior to. I feel like there was some misinformation there, but that is all right. So as is typical with panels, we're going to have a brief discussion here up on the stage for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we will open it up to questions. So please, as you're hearing these amazing folks talk about the work that they're doing, jot down some questions. I can't necessarily guarantee that we'll get to you, but hopefully you'll be able to find them throughout the course of the conference, and you can follow up on your questions if you're not able to offer them now and here. Sound good? All right, I'm gonna work on y'all with this mumbling, okay? I know you're tired. I know, I understand. I'm sweating right now, and it's not the lights, it's the workout. So in order to kick off this panel, I do have a question that I would like to ask all three of you all, and don't necessarily feel like you have to answer in the order that you're sitting, just as you feel so compelled. But the question is, we are living in a time of deep ecological, civic, and economic instability. I think we're all well aware of that. And so my question is, how do you envision Black futurism as a tool that might help us to meet these challenges from a place that's rooted in transformative justice?
Let's break up the order first. I'm gonna pitch to you. Go for it.
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, you. Okay, fine. Hi, everybody. Kenneth Bailey, Design Studio for Social Intervention. And one of the thoughts I've been having about sort of concepts with Black futures is we have to live a Black present that models the future we want. So we have to make a present that we feel called to, we feel can call people from our social lives into, and we actually feel models the kind of world we want. And I feel like a lot of the practice that we do at our studio is trying to speculate and actually test and prototype the present such that it can create new lines of flight that would make sort of Black futures and futures for all of us just and transformative. But if that's to happen, we need to do it now. And so I think one of the challenges for us is how do we, one, find the time and the resources when what we're trying to do is, make it in life. You're trying to become fabulous and famous and successful, and a lot of you already are. But where do you make the time to make these alterities? Where do we find the time to make these alternative ways of being and doing and living present, so that other people can actually attach to them and start to want them and then continue to move them along? Otherwise, the future is always going to be some imaginary thing in our heads, and other people will shape it if we don't actually create these things that attract us into a present that then creates a line of flight to the future we want.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I was going to respond to it too, and by giving it a little context. So 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, I had the opportunity to take two of my research assistants to South Africa. We were in Pretoria, Johannesburg, and Cape Town. And while in Cape Town, we were taken out to one of the townships, Kailicha. And it is everything you would imagine a township to be. And so we were walking through, and we were walking through with a group of Black planners, and they were describing conditions and efforts that they were working on. And at one point, they started to describe that we are teaching people how to imagine. And I thought that was just particularly a peculiar thing to say. He didn't say we were teaching people how to plan. And it kind of dawned on me that we take for granted that people can imagine. And if Black futurism is principally about the imaginary, I think we have to stop and recognize that not everybody maybe understands what imagining means, because when we say that, we automatically think of a future. But for those folks in that township, the future was tomorrow. And so Black futurism was tomorrow. It was immediate, it was urgent, and it was about survival. So kind of piggybacking on what Kenneth said, this notion of the tool of being able to imagine, not plan or imagine, is I think something we as designers need to disaggregate a little bit and understand that people who are in survival mode, lots of Black and brown bodies all over the globe, to imagine tomorrow is something that they're interested in, not imagining 2030. So how are we thinking about Black futurism tools in terms of time, in terms of scale, and in terms of constituency? So it was really interesting, the question about distinguishing between Black and African American, right? And so I also don't think the tools for the Black imaginary or Black futurism or Black futurism itself is a monolith. We are not sitting in this room as one type of Black, right? Black men's imaginary, Black women's imaginary, Black queer imaginary, Black youth imaginary, Black elder imaginary, they're all very different and complex. So I think what I hope we'll begin to do today, and you begin to contemplate over your time here with us, is how we distinguish the imaginary from planning and design, and how we also, as designers, think about and teach how do we get people imagining and recognizing that they're imagining in different scales and periods of time.
Well, thank you both for that. Again, I'm Malcolm Davis, and I work with a firm called Perkins & Will, and I work out of our North Carolina practice where we focus a lot about, or on culture, civil rights, and so forth, and we've got a body of work that I'm now a part of after a year and a half, which speaks to a lot of these sort of looks out to the future. But I find as we consider these things and consider these issues, the notion of Black futurism, I'm drawn back to us have an understanding of history and accomplishment. And if we think back to all of our ancestors and have these conversations with them, there was a time when they had to imagine, they had to aspire. And I think as we grow and we move forward as designers, it's important for us to understand what those folks have accomplished. And it's exciting, actually, once you sort of sit down and read and have these conversations to understand where they may have been 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and to be inspired just by that. And to look towards the future with imagination, but with also understanding of what's been achieved. I think it's just an incredible concept. I think that we cannot look towards the future without understanding what's come behind us and what's sort of brought us up and built us up to be able to succeed. It's very important.
Yes, okay, thank you. Those were all very powerful answers, and I appreciated the kind of lens of time, of course, that you all talked about, going forward, backwards, present, and how we're able to scale that in order to be able to best answer this question. So thank you for that. My next question is to you, Toni, and the question is, how might we shape Black futures through the lens of the Just City Lab Index? And kind of furthering that, what do justice and equity look like in the future?
Okay, so for those of you who have not visited Room 109, the Just City Cipher, or know about the Just City Index, I have the good fortune of heading a design lab here called the Just City Lab. There's a website, designforthejustcity.org, and I started that research in a point in my career where I was reflecting back on both the work I did as an architect and an urban designer in planning, and wondering if I was having any real meaning or lasting impact on social and spatial justice. And I was doing that because I was finding in all the cities that I worked in, so from Chicago to New York to DC to Newark, New Jersey to Detroit to Milwaukee to Memphis, the start of my projects was always rooted in the same problem. It was rooted in the problem of racially segregated cities. It was rooted in the condition of disparity affecting a particular population. It was rooted in disinvestment. It was rooted in imbalanced power in terms of who was sitting at the client table. And I was reflecting on the work I'd done in DC in particular, because at the time that I was there in the 2000s, we did an extraordinary amount of urban design and planning work, and a lot of that is in the ground now. And as I walked through those neighborhoods, you know, it was stark to me that I didn't see people who looked like me when I once did, but the physical environments were thriving. So it's like, oh, okay. I know we had good intentions. I know we set out, quote unquote, equitable practices, but still the communities and neighborhoods had changed in a way that I could not have anticipated. And it forced me to ask the question of, how do we deepen the work we do as planners and designers? And how do we think about planning and design as policy making, not just the outputs or outcomes of perspectives or a design problem that a client gives us, right? And so the lab gave me an opportunity to figure out different ways to interrogate that question for myself in the way that I can't do in practice and the way that I can't deepen in the classroom. And so the first thing I wanted to do, because I was having clients come to me and ask me about doing sustainability plans or resiliency plans or equity plans. And when I asked them what they meant by those terms, I was usually met with, I don't know, I'm trying to figure that out. But everyone wants equity, and it's such a ubiquitous term now that I started rejecting it just outright. And it was also during the time where we were having, so it was Michael Brown, Philandro Castro, mass shootings, assaults on women's health care, climate issues. And so it was just the 2016 election. And so I just felt like, this isn't just about equity. There are other values and principles that I think people are after, but we keep using this clout-like word of equity, and then we sit around the table nodding our head, yes, we want equity, but then there are like 15 different answers to that in people's rooms. So you leave the room going, yeah, we're gonna work on equity, and nothing shows up. Super frustrated by that. So that's what this is. So, when Phil, I keep calling Pierce Phil in my head. So when Pierce was talking about words for change or shape worlds, I left last night going, are words really sufficient? And I remembered I created a whole language, right? The power of the pen, as my dear friend Allison said this morning, and words really do matter. And I think they matter because until we start to use really specific and nuanced languages about what we need, want, and demand with people sitting across the table from us, and we start to define what those words mean, we are always gonna leave the room shaking our head yes to equity and nothing showing up. So the index is a language of 50 values that we have designed and open sourced for people to go back into their communities, grass tops, grassroots. I'm gonna be very clear. The work that we do is not only about mobilizing communities and folks on the ground, we have got to change institutional leaderships and frameworks and structures. This has gotta be a two-way movement towards change, right? And so the language is designed to help all of us be more intentional and specific about what the outcomes are. It's also meant for those of you from New York to there's like a big St. Louis crew in the house, Seattle, Chicago, the suburbs of DC, Prince George, wherever. You all have very distinct and different conditions of injustice. And so how you define the just city for your city should be different. And this index is designed to help you generate this conversation. I was meeting with a group of young folks from LA, and they said, and they were describing to me how they found the index online on our website and used it to generate conversations. It's also intended to help you generate conversations or set tables for people of difference, right? Because I find the only way that we start to break down the barriers is to ensure that we're talking the same language. So I do think words can shape worlds, in addition to the pen, and visualizing that change. So that was really the principal kind of goal of the index. And so I will stop talking after I say this. So in 109 is our cipher room, and everybody's swag bag has one of these. And we really do want you to contemplate your notion of what a Black futurism for Just City is and the values that are important to it. And when you registered, everybody got to select one of their value pens. I think one of the important outcomes that we can produce by continuing to create this forum is to actually lift the conversation out of it and push it out into the world. And so the way we're wanting to contribute by pushing it out in the world is to have you register your voice around what this means. Leave it in our cipher room. Go have conversations in the cipher room with new people you're meeting, because we can actually document the things we want and the things we believe are important, and we can push this into the world and further the movement with people who weren't able to come this weekend. So that's what the index means to me.
Excellent, thank you. And I mean, as you were talking, I was wondering, and we might have this part of the larger Q&A, because I definitely want to get to some of the other questions here, but what systems you all have put in place to prevent the words that are in that document from becoming very overused, quite like equity, like, you know, because I'm pretty sure there was a conversation a few years ago at some table where it was like, oh, we don't want equality, we want equity. Equity is the important word. How do we focus on that? Yeah. And, you know, what are the actions that we can take as a community, as designers, to prevent this amazing index from kind of falling into that trap?
Well, one of the things we did is intentionally kept it large. I remember our team, and there are a number of current as well as alumni research assistants in the room today. And some of you may remember we were having conversations, is this too large? Should we shrink it? And I think keeping it at 50 is part of guarding against that. If you use the tool as a way to create a collective vision or statement or manifesto, you're kind of forced in the way to access the larger vocabulary and then get to the things that are important. A good example is we have under welfare, we have security, protection, safety. Now, depending on who I'm talking to and what city I mean, those three things take on very distinct definitions. It may take on a different definition based on gender, right? Women may, you know, I'm not gonna generalize, but someone may think protection is more important than safety. Right? And so by layering in all of these nuances of language, and we actually give a definition for the word too, those are the things we've done to help guard against just throwing out a bunch of words and then still leaving the table without knowing what people really mean.
Thank you, thank you. So my next question is for you, Malcolm. And I would like for you to speak to how a project like Destination Crenshaw challenges what is possible within the field of design, and also kind of elaborating on that, what excites you the most about what design can do for our communities in the future.
Well, thanks. I don't know that the images have appeared, but for the LA crew that's back there, Destination Crenshaw is a project in South Central Los Angeles, and it really is about you know, any number of things that are happening as forces in our cities today. But LA is at the forefront of a lot of the things that we might call assault on the part of politics, on the part of economics. And this project was born out of a train line that's running from LAX to downtown Los Angeles. And for about 1.3 miles, someone chose to save a few bucks, maybe on the order of over $1 billion, to set the train at grade and run it right through the middle and the heart of the Crenshaw community, initially without even consideration of having a station. The councilman fought for that. We now have a station that's happening at Slauson and Crenshaw, adjacent to the Nipsey Hussle location. So that is happening. But we thought, you know, there's a much bigger story, there's a much bigger opportunity. We are basically serving 9 to 10 sort of interventions, if you will, within this district of art, of culture, these opportunities with major artists. There will be 10 to 12 of those invited artists that will be making their efforts and making their work shown and known within this section of town. But there will also be over 100 other sort of just loose art pieces that will appear on anything from transformers to light poles to streets. The wall will be redone at 50th Street. And this project, if you looked at the way that black folks came out to Los Angeles, the second migration, if you will, from the South, it's about sort of a resilience of our people. And we have sort of shaped the project around the giant star root, or the grass, which is the same grass that served in its dead form as the bedding in our slave ships as our diasporic relatives came over to this country. And this particular weed, this grass, is one that can grow anywhere. And we adopted a notion of having this plant and knowing that this plant could grow wherever it was planted or transported, just like our folks have done. So wherever we have landed, wherever we have been pushed around in the city and the area of Los Angeles, folks take root again, they're strong, they find a way of developing new business, developing new culture. And this is a way of resetting that, looking at it more proudly, and making sure that despite sort of this notion of gentrification that is also happening around that area, as you guys know, that they will not forget when they arrive that there was all of this culture, all of these things that were exported around the country, all of these trends, the Shenandoah Toy Factory, all of these great things that happened and came out of LA that we always forget, or people seem to forget, Soul Train, all of these great things that were contributed to the US worldwide, or US and worldwide. And this project is about setting those things. It's interventions within public space, private space, through contributors, and it's a living museum, a living experience. And we're really excited about it. Despite this train, we're hoping that as people come in from Los Angeles, that they're gonna see this. They're gonna see this from the train. They may be encouraged to get off at Slauson, but we hope that they'll also come back, use the digital media and so forth to really experience this part of Black LA. And it's what we call unapologetic. We've encouraged the residents, we've encouraged the artists to not be afraid and ashamed of all the great things that have happened, and look towards the future in a way that celebrates all of these things from the past. And I think, you know, as we look at a way of really addressing and capturing things through design, this is a great way to do that. I mean, you're using really urban space, you're being sort of creative about the spaces that can sort of capture this art, and it's really going to be exciting. And the fact that it will change is also representative of what's happening in several other cities around the country, where we can look at urban space, public space, and make sure that people don't forget about us, and that we look to the future in a way that's bright and clear, and continue to sort of evolve and design and create new things and make sure that people know we're here.
Thank you. Just as a quick follow-up question to that, could you very briefly speak to how the community was mobilized in order to, you know, have the conversation around the train station? Because you said obviously the train was planned without any consultation to the community, no community engagement. So what was maybe like 2 or 3 mobilizing strategies for the community in order?
Well, I think you started out because you had a really strong councilman who was from the district. He was very interested and very sort of insulted, if you will, by the way that this was coming about. And he started a community conversation. But there were also leaders there. Nipsey Hussle in particular was a part of that conversation, but there are many, many others. The Finleys, all kinds of folks were involved with that, and they really sort of galvanized before we came about to design. And there were other designers that came aboard before our firm was invited in. They started the process, and they started to get the community together. We picked that up, and we made sure that the voices were being heard, there were committees formed, and there's still people continuing to talk and monitor, and the elders are involved, the youth are involved with really making sure that this thing takes the right path. I will say, though, that my concern in all of this, you've talked a lot about sort of policy and these kinds of things. Policy also begets economic growth and progress. And I think what's missing right now, and what's a challenge in the water and in the ground, as they say in LA, is the notion that the economic piece, this art piece, is going to actually struggle in a way to sort of combat the gentrification and perhaps the lack of other kinds of investment in capitalism that still need to be happening. We would like to see that as a parallel to the project, to make sure that the business owners that are there have an opportunity to stay, that there are all kinds of incentives and things set in place to make sure that those black businesses also stay within the corridor as this place changes and evolves.
Thank you. Thank you. And so my next question is for you, Kenneth. In your work, how do you define social intervention? And how might we shape Black futures through the practice of public making?
So we often talk about social interventions, and it's a definition that we use in the larger, that's part of the larger field of people who are interested in socially engaged art or art in the public domain here. And the way we like to talk about it at the studio are actions or tactics or gestures that were designed or imagined to interfere or interrupt habits in culture or habits in the way we live our daily lives that we aren't aware of, to one, make that habit or technique surfaceable, and for that gesture to invite people into new ways of living in the world. So one of the first interventions we did with about a decade ago here in Boston, and our outfit is in Dorchester. We did with the youth organizing community here. And youth organizers are people who are young but have taken on the techniques of community organizing to fight around the things that face young people. And about a decade ago, a bunch of youth organizers approached us and asked us if we could help them imagine new ways to address youth violence. And so we said, of course, we're a design studio for social intervention. That's what we did. And so one of the things we did was we reimagined design, because design as it's currently designed is a product-based sort of set of techniques, and so we had to redesign design in order to develop a set of techniques that are actually about civil society. And so we have a book coming out on that later too. But for now, and a lot of this work was really about sort of developing that methodology. So we used a new way of approaching design where we brought in artists who were trained formally in thinking about beauty, aesthetics, and form, and relationality, and a bunch of other things to work with those of us in the social justice sector who were trained to think about power, oppression, opposition, to marry those ways of understanding in the world such that we can start to find new levers or find new ways to solve social problems. And we took that kind of approach and did what you might think of as user research or ethnographic research or everyday life research, and we started to find new kinds of social cues or new social agreements that nobody had ever thought to inspect, or they just took for granted. And one of them was this thing, and I don't know if it still exists, and probably does, but this unspoken agreement that if one young person would make eye contact with another young person, that you could turn it up. The eye contact would quickly turn from eye contact to who are you staring at to let's do it. And they were like, once we found that thing, we set it back out and we said, this is a thing. And they said, oh, you're talking about screw face. Oh, that's the grill. Oh, that's this. And we were like, have you ever thought about trying to do something with it? And they were like, you can't do anything about that. And so a lot of our work is about finding these unspoken agreements in the fabric of our social lives, making them visible, and finding strategies with which to try to address those things that we often don't think are changeable. And so for us, good social interventions do that kind of work and try to find a linchpin in social life that is the symbol and the thing. So the grill symbolizes the larger system of violence, but the grill is a thing. And so if you can intervene in that, it can function as a system shift or a lever with which to try to change a set of cultural assumptions, a set of cultural agreements. And for us, trying to rewire culture or rewire our assumptions about our agreements around relationality is what is where the power of social intervention as a methodology for social change has its most sort of grip. So that's my answer for what social interventions are.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I want to say one other thing about Blackness. I just, given that I come out of a social change sector, I just want to say this. You can have a sort of a definition of Blackness that has to do with ethnos, like African American or Afro-Colombian or Afro-Brazilian, and there's that. It's true. We all have the same genealogy, coming through the transatlantic slave trade, 400 years of inequality, give a shout out to them. That's a thing. But then there's also Blackness, as my friend Cindy in the audience would say, as a position in a power matrix. And Blackness as a position in a power matrix can often include people who you don't think are Black, but are. So I spent a lot of time in Australia, like that thing said I did a residency in Tasmania. Aboriginal people identify as Black. And Aboriginal people identify as Black because because they are dealing with the same power relations that we're dealing with. So I just wanted to point that out. As we use the term Blackness, Blackness is an international political term that has to do with coloniality. It has to do with dispossession. It has to do with a relationship to the present. It has to do with power. And so we just need to keep that in mind as we're sort of working through and working with who we and what we think Blackness is.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm glad you remembered that last point. I appreciate that. So what I would like to do now is start to open it up to the audience for some questions, because I do want to make sure that we're able to fit in as many as possible. I was not told who the mic runners are, so okay, I have one. And there's a person here with a white shirt and a hat on whose hand shot up before I even finished the invitation. So we're going to let them go first.
What's going on, Sora? My name is Jasper McCoy, and I just have this question about equality and equity. So as Black creativity stands the most prolific platform in the 21st century, where do we imagine non-people of color in the future we are manifesting? And in the light of self-sufficiency like Black Wall Street or Wakanda, as an example, and in the other light of Seneca Village in New York, where it was taken away from us.
Read the middle part of the question before the examples.
Where do non-people of color stand in the future that we manifest, based on equality and equity?
That's what you asked, right? Where do non-people of color?
Yeah.
White folks, is that? Well, if you believe the census rate, and you just go by the numbers, they will be the new minority, right? But so it kind of connects to the way in which, in this country in particular, and in different ways in different countries, when you, as people identify as a person of color or Black, the ways in which the politics of power and Blackness are so connected, right? And so if you imagine a Black future where current people of color become the majority, I think the question is, what do they then do with that power, or have they even assumed it? And so you all being in the middle of that transition, what are you doing to claim your power as the next generations behind you move into that shift? Right, so in this manifesto, we're asking you to think about that question as it relates to what are you going to do? And I firmly believe that each of you can decide tomorrow to do something that is preparing you for that ownership of the future. Has nothing to do with anybody else. It may be the way you change your language. It may be the way you interact with people. It may, anything that moves you, to become the person, to be situated to use your agency. That's something you can do. There may be things that you can do to move your family or your tribe, right, to that action. And then that tribe then moves to change a community. We're actually asking you to think about that question on your manifesto. And so I don't know that I know the answer for where they sit, but they're going to be here. We're all, we're going to be very mixed, but there is this shift by the numbers. And the question, I think, is what are we starting to do, to move the power needle along with that shift, so that we are seated at the tables of decision making, et cetera. And in doing that, I think it also requires us to think about how you're using your skills as designers, planners, et cetera, to position you in positions of agency and power, which mean that there are a multitude of different ways that you can practice. So, like Allison, I started in a large corporate architecture firm, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, came here to do a Loeb, switched to the public sector, and now I'm doing my own projects. And I have this great luxury to decide who I want to work with, because I've developed a set of values and interests and a kind of commitment to want to work on really tough and challenging things, right? So each of you can be moving to that space and finding yourself. So Pierce is running for state senate. So we've got to move out into different areas of the world to ensure that I am, when here 10 years from now, I will have read about all of you, because you would have made some impact on the world, big or small, and we know about you. To that question about how come when I Google something, I want to be able to Google every one of you all in 10 or 20 years and know that you're doing things. But that commitment can start with how you begin to recognize your power, change the way you operate in that situation, and then pay it out.
Anybody else? Before we go to the next, you have an answer, okay?
I just want to say that that's a great design problem.
It is a great design problem.
And it requires design research, social design research, and we have to propose new relations and propose new ways of occupying social space with each other now. If we want those to be different in the future, let's look at Brazil. Brazil is half black. Brazil's half black, and it's a mess. So we can, you know what I mean? And a lot of it has to do with, people who don't imagine themselves as black are freaking out, and they're willing to take the country down with them in order to maintain power. If we're gonna have a new world and we're not gonna be taken down by this regime, the whiteness as a regime of reality, like a way of understanding the world, like the way Sarah Ahmed talks about as a straightening device, a way of orienting us all to the world. If we're gonna sort of take that epistemology down, that way of understanding the world, we have to practice proposing new relations, and I think that it's got to imagine something beyond these categories, the binaries. It's got to imagine something else, and it's got to actually be enticing to all of us. And unfortunately, when you think a lot about, like Cesar McDowell talks a lot about design from the margins or design from sort of alterity. People of color or black people or the field of blackness or however we want to talk about that, it's probably going to be us that will imagine that.
Thank you.
So we got work to do.
He keeps doing this to me. I'm gonna fight you. All right. Okay, thank you.
How about a softball question? heart question.
Hi, my name is Kayla Graves. I am an analyst at HRNA Advisors, a firm based in New York City. My question is, I do a lot of work across the country, specifically with downtown revitalization and the term equitable economic development. And my question is, how do we move past equitable development being, just street signage or lighting, and towards, empowerment in communities, whether that's, somebody mentioned small business development. How do we move from that in order to create change and build power in communities?
I got one for it.
I got one too. Malcolm, you got one?
Go for it. Then I'll do.
Well, I think I'm going to pick up just a little bit from the last question to head into this one. And I think this notion of being prepared and planning and designing into sort of what futures might look like and starting that now is key. But I don't want the activity to sort of stop at the design table. For our architects, for our planners, this notion of sort of the citizen designer and what you can do if you sort of get out from the office or get out from the classroom and sort of sit on that committee or go to this meeting and hear what they are saying, talking, and planning about your future, and look at that through this great design lens that you have. And I think you then find that in these cities and in these communities where these things are being discussed, you have the opportunity by sitting in and talking to those folks and forming relationships to help change. And I think also we have the unique position as designers because we have clients, right? Some of these folks have sort of capital. They're positioned to be able to help make change because they may own property. And so often they're actually sensitive to what's happening in our cities as well. They're serving on some of those same panels, but they may not have the same design acumen that we do. And I think that's a fantastic way to start it. You come in, you represent, you have sort of credibility because you're bringing that to the table. You're not sort of looking at or being looked at as some other kind of person from the citizenry. You're actually bringing knowledge and you want to help. So often I just don't think that we are part of those conversations. I've been a part of a long line of people who have sort of designers who have sort of stepped up and have inspired me to do that, and I've asked others that are in my midst to also do it. And I think that's a really key way of getting in and bringing other folks out there with you. It's critical to these conversations.
You go, then I'll go.
Quickly.
Okay.
We're going to try to get one more question in as well.
So I'll make this really quick. I'll try to make it really quick. I think that's a fabulous question about equitable economic growth and development because, again, it's throwing in equity. And what I have found in my practice when I've been asked to do that, and I tell my clients I kind of reject that term because people tend to lean into it in two ways. One, and you named a couple. One is it's procurement and contracting, right? So lots of cities have MBE, WBE requirements. So equitable development means you're gonna give a person of color a slice of a contract or part of a development deal or data, and we do that and we check the box and we say that's good. And that is good. Like there should be ways in which you are seeing black and brown developers and contractors and businesses building your city, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum where I find the limitations of that practice are around community engagement. Exactly. Right, so equitable development is we go and do some engagement in the community and we hear their voices and they're included and we've been equitable.
Exactly.
That ain't enough. And this is like what brings us back to the index, right? Because inherent to me in building towards equitable economic growth and development is a shared ownership, shared leadership, shared power, right? All connected to the outcomes and products, right? How are policies being redirected? Who's shaping the policy? Right? How are we changing established leadership so that that table is more diverse, that is then looking out for those issues in a more authentic way? So on a project that I've been working on in St. Louis on an urban greenway, when asked to help develop a a set of practices around equitable economic development related to this greenway, we filled in the gap. We said it is about business participation, but let's talk about this in terms of business, job, wealth creation, and ownership. Let's talk about civic capacity and participation. In the middle, let's talk about quality of life, and let's talk about identity and culture. And then how do you get people to see the way in which equity shows up for them through this much broader set of practices? So within that, there are about 27 different practices that we've developed within each of those categories, so that we don't end up with just the binaries that really will only affect a few people and are not sustainable ways of ensuring that equity, ownership, participation, power show up.
Want to get in there?
Fast.
Okay.
My thing is, we've been writing a lot and trying to think a lot about this concept called horizontal development, where we challenge the notion that this sort of vertical, top-down development that we have come accustomed to being the sort of raison d'etre for urban change and the making of the city we have to get past it. We have to figure out ways to aggregate communities and to have communities imagine the cities that they're in and to actually propose development the other way around. And we're calling that horizontal development. And we're saying that if we want cities to be what we want them to be, we have to start dealing with cities and development regimes inside of cities as the public. And right now, they're the neoliberal private. And we have to have a shift in how we imagine our relationship to them, and that's going to be a fight. Because the current relationships are making zillions for the development regimes and the vertical corporate strategy. If we're going to turn that around, we have to be willing to have maintained fights in cities for spatial justice.
Excellent, thank you. So we are out of time. I do apologize. Listen, I'm not the one running the clock, okay? I'm sorry. But before we wrap up, Can I just ask my question, please? Because I do have the mic. They gave me the mic. Yes, okay. I ain't give you the mic, honey. Listen. It's an important question. It's a very important question. The organizers say go for it. Okay, so you and your mic, go ahead.
Thank you, organizers, so much. My name's Regine Gilbert. I'm visiting industry assistant faculty at NYU's Tandon School of Engineering. My question for the panel, beyond ADA, how are you thinking about accessibility for the disabled community in your work?
First, come to the Cypher Room 109 when you grab your lunch and you can finish this conversation, so it doesn't have to stop. On this project that we're working on the Greenway in St. Louis, we've actually had a lot of really intentional conversations with members of the disabled community. We've had specific representation as a part of the team and as a part of the process to think about the various ways, if you are designing a greenway, how do you make that truly accessible for the broadest segment of the population? We've been thinking about that not only in terms of the design and physical accessibility of where the routes are and how you get to them, but also through mechanisms of shared ownership and stewardship and programming. And so there is a small cohort of organizations and advocates that are a part of that team that are looking for ways to ensure that that is a very distinct population for which the Greenway as a method of mobility and access is being designed.
I was just going to jump in quickly. I think that's a fantastic question. You know, it's really the notion of universal design, right? And I think just like so many things, to be able to put your feet in someone else's shoes, your hands in their gloves, is about sort of experiencing their world, the world across sort of many, many, many notions of accessibility, to design through their eyes and to have a design that is sort of, it's not for just them, or something is not just for that population. It's for everybody to sort of experience the same spaces through their capabilities. Imagine that. Sort of the tactile notion of space, what you can touch as you're walking or moving through their space, and to be able to experience it, say, the same way that someone who cannot see as well, or someone who cannot walk as long, you know, what happens along the same beats of a sort of stamina that that person may have. And so as opposed to sort of this notion that's been the last 10, 20 years of maybe making sure that the component of the same experience is designed for that person because we have a ramp so they get there, well, what if everybody has to use the same path? What if everybody has to sit in that same location? So that's the way we're kind of looking at it. And you'd be amazed that if, you know, once you sort of sit back and design in that manner, the exciting things that start to happen, you know, a center for the blind, a center for someone that has, I don't know, you name it. But just to really be able to put yourself in their seat is just an amazing opportunity. I encourage everybody to kind of look at it from that perspective.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else got a mic? We good? All right. So my last question to wrap us up is going to be a very quick question. It is not on the list. I do not apologize. But what song absolutely has to be on the soundtrack for Black Futurism? Go.
Distant Planet, Mr. Futures.
Oh, you was ready for this.
I
Okay.
mean, Mr.
All right.
Fingers. Distant Planet by Fingers.
Okay. Okay.
All the songs we have on the mixtape in the Just City Cypher Room 109.
Yeah, you better come through with this consistent plug. You better come through.
It's got to be the Midnight Marauders album. Little Layla.
I'll give you a real answer. What's Going On, Marvin Gaye? Because believe it or not, he was a Black futurist. So there you go.
Right. I'm going to cheat and just say anything by Andre 3000 bias. Thank you. Okay. So thank you all so very much for your time, your energy, your professionalism, and your capacities. Thank you all for your questions. I have no idea what's next, so I'm going to let somebody else tell you all, but thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aseswa. I'm a Doctor of Design student here at the GSD. And I'm also your logistics and planning chair for this year's conference. And I just want to start out by saying a very big thank you to all our panelists and the moderator for leading such an incredible discussion. And thank you all for joining us this year. As we head out now, we will be serving lunch to you guys. And after that, we'll meet back here for the third session. And lunch today will actually be provided by Fresh Food Generation. Fresh Food Generation, we're very excited to partner with. They are a Black-owned business, and they focus on farm-to-plate Caribbean food. They are passionate about creating job opportunities for people in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, which are neighborhoods in Boston that are made up primarily of people of color. So lunch will be served in room 124 and 111. And for all reps of companies who registered for the networking mixer, please head to the porticos, room 121 to 123. And if you would like to join the mixer, please head there as well, as we'll be taking signups outside the door. And please make sure you visit the Just City Cypher Room to continue the conversation. And if you sign up for the Playground of Empathy, it's filled up, but you're allowed to bring a friend. So thank you all, and we'll meet you back here.